Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Doing is here with me. There are lots of games played this weekend. There were some winners, there were some losers. No participation trophies handed out over the weekend. Josh, who's your winner?
My winner, San Jose State.
San Jose State, but dude, they're an undefeated non-group of five team, and they didn't get a chance to get in the playoff. Why are they your winner?
Are you ready for some of these stats about how incredible their season has been?
Hit me.
So they got this 34-20 win over perennial power Boise State to claim their first Mountain West title. They started 7-0 and finished 7-0 for the first time since 1939. This is their first winning season since 2012. And Nick Starkel, their quarterback who played at Texas A&M and Arkansas, another point to show the difference between Power 5 conferences and non-Power 5 conferences, set a Mountain West championship game record with 453 passing yards. They couldn't run the ball, but it didn't matter because Starkel was so good. He broke Derek Carr's record that he set a while back. I believe it was 2013. This is just cool. And it's going to sort of get lost because of Coastal Carolina, who also came out of nowhere and had this sort of similar story about not only being an underdog, but also just not being a good football program in recent memory, and all of a sudden having this phenomenal season. And now Starkel was a grad transfer, so we'll see where this thing goes. But just good for them. They got the job done. There was a lot of criticism and they're just scared of that they weren't going to beat Boise State and that this wasn't legit. And they did what they could and they proved it on the field. So good for San Jose State. That's all I'm saying.
Shouts to San Jose State. I mean, of course, they don't get the respect from the College Football Playoff Committee, so, like, whatever. But whatever. I also love how, I would love to, see somebody write a story about how group of five teams who have seasons like that, or just mid-majors who have seasons like that, I would love to hear them talk about what success means for their season. It's almost like people talk about it like the group of five team shouldn't be proud of what they've done because they don't get a chance to play in the college football playoff. This is the other part, right? And it's been a long time since it's been a year since we had bowls, but part of what the College Football Playoff Committee, the College Football Playoff has done, I don't think there are very many negatives to the College Football Playoff, but one of them is that just bowl games and great seasons aren't valued the way that they used to be. Like, for crying out loud, the Rose Bowl, if it's not part of the College Football Playoff,
right,
is all of a sudden a failure. It's the Rose Bowl, for crying out loud. Like, the Rose Bowl used to be it's just not the same anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden being the Rose Bowl champion is just disappointing because you didn't get a chance to play for a national title. And at the end of the season, we're not celebrating what Cincinnati has done this season. We're pissed off because the College Football Playoff the committee didn't respect them, right? Cincinnati just had an incredible year, and now they get to go play in the Peach Bowl on New Year's Day. That's an awesome season for Cincinnati, for any team, let me be clear, but especially for a Cincinnati team. And that San Jose State team, that's an awesome season. Ultimately, it's not going to mean much in the college football playoff world and the tippity top of college football, and the same for Coastal to a certain extent. But but that was freaking awesome, and it should be celebrated. And what Cincinnati's done is freaking awesome and should be celebrated. And we shouldn't only be writing about how they've been shorted by the College Football Playoff Committee.
And I think you've seen a lot of that from San Jose State and from Coastal Carolina of doing a good job. I don't really like using that phrase, but being very appreciative of what they've been able to accomplish and sort of saying the goal is to finish this thing with a conference championship and a perfect record. We achieved the goal. We did what we could, and we're going to celebrate that. It is a little bit different from Cincinnati because of the schedule you have in the AAC and the fact it's in this weird middle between the rest of the conferences and the Power 5 conferences, but exactly right. And I think that they generally are, the teams themselves, the programs themselves, very much feel that way.
Right.
you've just got this overall sort of cloud that hangs over it because everybody else is upset on their behalf.
Right, because nobody writes about how excited the team is. Everyone writes about how pissed off the rest of the entitled fans are because of the way the team is thought about by the college football committee. So let's write that story. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, I'm all for San Jose State being your winner. My winner is the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
How about that?
91-88 victory over Illinois. Illinois is now 5-3.
Yeah.
And Illinois is about to be my loser, so we can get to them here in just a second. But they're now 6, and now Rutgers, yes, they beat Illinois, but they're now 6-0. They're atop the Big Ten standings. And also, like Rutgers might just be... Rutgers is good without fans, which is also something right, because I was worried a little bit about that, about if they could beat good teams consistently in their building. And right, prior to this, they had played nobody, and then they played Syracuse and Maryland, and then they played Illinois. So it's not like 5-1 is what you would have expected from Rutgers through these first 6 games with a loss against Illinois, maybe. So it's not like they're all that far from the start they were supposed to have, but getting off to a start like this in Big Ten play, and I'm all for having wins that teams won't have in conference play, and that's a big part of winning a conference, or having losses or not having losses, or on the other side of things, having losses that teams aren't going to have. And this is one of those wins that, like, I still like Illinois a lot. I'm not sure their ceiling at this point is as high as I thought it was. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, beating Illinois is something a lot of teams aren't going to do, right? And Rutgers has now already done it. They've done it early. At some point, Illinois is going to get hot and win 4 or 5 games in a row in the Big Ten. Like, I think that'll happen at some point. But Rutgers is my winner because, like, they're just clearly good again. Like, really good. Ron Harper Jr. is a boss. Like, that dude just wasn't missing down the stretch. Every time Illinois got a little close, it was Ron Harper. Yep. Oh, that's a 3-pointer. Game's over. Right. He had 28. They're so deep. Jacob Young was awesome as well. He had 24. He's averaging 16 this year as well. This is a good basketball team, and this was the reminder that what they did last year wasn't a pipe dream, and they're back with a very, with their eyes set on an even higher goal, and they have the team that's certainly capable of doing it.
And that's how the perception changes when you do what they did last season, even though they weren't able to finish it with a appearance in the NCAA tournament. I had the same questions of, can you keep this up in the rack and be unbeatable at home without fans? We've seen 1-year success stories before, and then it kind of fell apart. Can they keep it up? Yeah, the start to the season hasn't been incredibly impressive. This was a really good win. But it means something different, and it signals something different because this was the same team we saw have so much success last season. Mm-hmm. And now they're continuing it. And the other thing that you mentioned that was my big takeaway, it's not like Illinois just fell apart. These dudes just kept making plays. That was a big-time finish to that game.
Yep.
And specifically Ron Harper Jr., but that whole team, Jacob Young, Geo Baker, they just had an answer every single time. It was incredibly impressive that he got. And now the Big Ten looks just like that. A 8-hour stretch between the end of this game and the end of the Northwestern Michigan State game. Big Ten looks quite different.
But it's also at the same, like, it looks different, but it also is just so Big Ten of the Big Ten to have this kind of stretch where Rutgers was 19th in the country and was at home, but Northwestern was not 19th in the country. Michigan State was 4th, and right, it's very Big Ten of the Big Ten to have teams beat teams they're not supposed to. Just emphasize this point that we talk about all the time, that you just don't have any off nights in the Big Ten, even against your teams like Northwestern, who are supposed to finish outside of the top 10 in this conference. And they put everybody puts good basketball teams on the floor in the Big Ten, pretty much, right?
Yep. Minnesota just went and got a win against St. Louis.
Right.
Marcus Carr, I mean, yeah.
My boy.
And that's also, and so to your loser, that it's not as much about Rutgers for me as it is, if you want to win this conference, Illinois, you kind of got to find a way to win that game. Now, it's a loss a lot of teams are going to have. It's not the end of the world, but it changes how I feel about Illinois' ceiling and their ability to win the Big Ten, which is exactly why they're your loser, I would have to think.
And also, like, through their first 8 games, I'm not sold that Illinois is just a good team that doesn't win big games.
That's fair.
Or at least big games that are close late.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they lose to Missouri, they lose to Rutgers, they fade down the stretch against Baylor. I don't think Duke's not a good basketball team, so I'm not putting that in there, even though that, Duke was 10th in the country at the time. Duke is not the 10th best team in the country, not anywhere close.
And they started off really well, so they weren't playing a close game late.
Right, exactly. So my point being is that you have to beat good teams to win this conference. You can't just go and beat the Minnesotas of the world and win this conference, right? Like, you have to, and they got a lot of games at home coming up, but you have to go at Northwestern. At Michigan State, you get Iowa in your building, you get Ohio State in your building, you get IU in your building. Like, you have to win games. You have to win close games against good teams in this conference. And every chance Illinois has gotten to win a close game against a good team this season, they've lost. And the Baylor game, they ended up losing by 13, but they were close for a lot of that game. Like I said, faded down the stretch. But until they win a close game, I'm not picking them to win a close game. If there's 5 minutes left and they're down by 2 or up by 2, I'm not sold they're going to win a game until they win a game.
And that's where I really thought that they were going to be good this season. And they just haven't been.
And I like, Dosunmu has had some, right, there's just, like, Dosunmu is really great, but has his lapses down the stretch. And then outside of him, like, I don't know where I'm going if it's not Dosunmu making all the plays down, like, late in games, which is fine. I mean, Dosunmu is a first-team All-American type player. That's who you want in there. But he hasn't been as rock-solid late in games and big moments as I thought he was going to be. And this was, and the other part that worries me about this is that they got respectable contributions from Trent Frazier, from DeMonte Williams. Their freshmen were bad again against a good team. Like Adam Miller and Andre Cabello, 36 minutes combined, they were 1 of 7 from the field for 4 points. And Cabello had fouled out with 5 minutes left.
Yep.
That's the other part of this that concerns me. And maybe as we get later, but I'd like to see, even if it's marginal, incremental improvements from these guys in big games. And if anything, they've gone backwards. They just sort of disappear, these freshmen now, which is fine. But like I've said before, I got even more excited about this Illinois team as the season got underway because Adam Miller and Andre Cabello were good. They're very much closer to the team that went, what did they go in conference last year? 11-9?
Something like that.
12-8, something like that. The point, they're a lot closer to that team than I thought they were in terms of where they finish in the Big Ten. If those guys are just not good at all, because right, Coburn was good, Dosunmu was good, Williams was good, and Frazier was good, but those guys for the most part were good last year too. And
13-7.
They were 13-7. Okay, well, from what I've seen so far, and if their freshmen are going to be that unimportant in big games, then the over/under for wins in the Big 12 this year, in the Big 10 this year, should be 13.5, and it's a very real question if they can do any better than they did last year, and that's not going to be good enough to win this conference, which is fine. And Illinois was good last year, But right now, I don't think they're the top 5-7 team that I think both of us thought they had a chance to be. And they're just a really solid top 20 team that has some really, like, they still have a really great 1-2 punch with Dosunmu and Coburn, but they might not deserve the hype that they were getting in the preseason. They might just be roughly the same team that they were a season ago, which, let me be clear, is fine. That was a, fringe top 25, spent a lot of time in the top 25. We're going to go to the tournament comfortably. Winning 13 games in the Big Ten is something to be proud of, but it's also not what I thought they had a chance of being in the preseason.
And it's still early.
Sure, but it's also early, and they've played 3 games against good teams, and they've lost all 3.
Right. We're seeing a very concerning trend here. And I'm right there with you. I'm cooling off on this team quickly. I don't feel good about them winning the Big Ten right now. I'll leave it at that.
My Badgers just get the job done. Sorry. Who's your loser? Did we go through your loser? I don't think we did. Who's your loser?
Ironically, Wisconsin is tied into my loser.
Okay, tell me.
My loser is the state of college basketball in the state of Kentucky.
Why?
We got so you got Kentucky at 1-5.
Oh right, and Wisconsin beat Louisville by like 80.
Right. Kentucky is in complete disarray. Lost to North Carolina. It's an absolute mess.
Did you see some of the reports too that like the locker room is falling apart? That's really concerning because you've never seen that before.
Right. They are not just bad. They are in real trouble of this thing getting irreparably bad.
Yeah.
And then, right, you've got Louisville losing by 37 to Wisconsin. Now, Louisville is better than Kentucky at this moment in time, obviously, but...
And they didn't have Carlik Jones.
Yeah. And Wisconsin's the better basketball team, not that big of a deal, but it just sort of all culminated into the state that is such a basketball hotbed, particularly at the college level with those 2 programs. And how good Kentucky's always good, and what Louisville did last season, and it's been really rough for Kentucky. It's been rough for Louisville, and we have a question here before we actually let's save that for next segment. We're gonna save our question from the audience for next segment.
Okay, real quick before we go to break, I put you in a 4-team tournament. You get the Northern Kentucky Norse, the Kentucky Wildcats, Louisville, and Western Kentucky. Who's winning the 4-team tournament? Or you put them in a round robin or something.
Is Louisville healthy?
Sure.
Louisville.
Is Western next? I think they are.
If you're telling me right now, if this thing started tomorrow, yeah.
I mean, this is a Western team that lost by 6 to West Virginia.
Yeah. No, they've had a good start to the season. That would be, yeah.
And they beat Alabama over the weekend. Anyways, but you're right. Kentucky the state typically heralded for their basketball performance. Right now, not so much. Coming up next, we're talking more college basketball. There's a professional team playing the sport right now, and they continue to just absolutely dominate the college basketball world. We'll talk about them and some other things. We'll answer audience questions. Woohoo! When we come back. 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.